Right, so we're here with Charlie Hardy, a Democrat running for U.S. House of Representatives. Welcome, Charlie.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I'm Brian Martin. I'm the managing editor here at the Wyoming Tribune Eagle.
I'm Sharon Fain with Black Hills Energy.
Bob Fecht, Cheyenne Animal Shelter.
So again, welcome, Charlie.
Thank you.
If you can start with what specific issues or concerns caused you to run for Congress this year?
Okay. First of all, though, can I say thank you, the Wyoming Tribune Eagle, for this opportunity. I look forward to the next hour. So often we go to panels and so on, and like the other day, you have 30 seconds to introduce yourself. You might as well say hi and hope that your smile is nicer than someone else's. And so having an hour is a privilege. I want to thank you for it. And I also hope you'll ask some really hard questions, and realizing these are questions not just for me, but for everyone. And I think it's very, very important. And your question was, why am I running? Okay. I really feel there's groups of people who have not been represented in Washington. The workers of Wyoming, the small business person, the small farmer, the small rancher. Those are my concerns. My concerns are people more than any corporation or anything along that line. And when I first thought about becoming involved in politics about 5 years ago, my son said to me, "Dad, don't say all you believe until you get elected." And I guess maybe that's good political advice. But I looked back over the things I've been saying and realized that I didn't follow that advice at all. I've been saying all these years the things that I believe in. And the only difference this year is I plan to say them even louder than I've ever said before. And so there are things, and I forgot to bring you a little card. We've got to diversify our economy. Here in Wyoming, we've also got to bring back to the United States and to Wyoming jobs that have gone outside of the United States. And people have got to be paid a decent wage. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing is our country will be stronger if people are healthy and people are well educated. And we've got to do everything we can do to see that people's right to health care and education is assured. And the third point would be we've got to get money out of politics. As long as it's a person who has the most money who is going to win elections, then it's a matter of buying an election, not a matter of winning an election. So those are the three other things that I have harped on for these past 5 years since I started to get involved in politics in Wyoming. And like I say, I just plan to shout louder about those. There are other issues, definitely, but those would be my main three.
Great. What qualifications do you bring to the table that you feel would make you a good congressperson, Charlie?
Maybe it's because I've been a traveler all my life, not a tourist. A tourist is someone who goes to another place to see things, to buy things, and comes back with photos and souvenirs. A traveler is someone who goes to listen to people, to walk with them, and come back with new perspectives and new ideas. So through the years, I've been in all 23 counties. I've traveled to all 23 counties of Wyoming. I've been in all 50 of the states. I've been in between 30 and 40 countries around the world. I've studied a little bit of 11 languages. And it's not to be a smart person, it's to be able to listen to people. And I think the problem with our politicians today is they have not gone out as travelers to look in people's eyes and to listen to what people are saying. And of all the qualifications, I think that probably is one of the most important. I run every day. I got up this morning and ran for half an hour before I came here. I don't know if that's a qualification. I don't know if you asked any of the other candidates if they ran this morning or if they've run for anything besides for office. But one day when I was running through Holiday Park, I was born here in Cheyenne, still live in the house where I was born. And it's just a few blocks from Holiday Park. And running around Minnehaha Lake, I think Claude Monet would envy me sometime if he could see the beauty I see. But one morning as I was running, came across 3 people walking the other way, and I said to them, it was a cold morning. I said, don't worry, summer will be here by August. And they smiled, I ran past, and then someone said, hey, can I ask you a question? And I said, sure. He said, I can see you have strong legs, but why are you running if a tiger's not chasing you? And I got thinking about that. A tiger has been chasing me my whole life. And it's a tiger that says that one person can't make any difference. And that unless you have $1 million, you're not of importance. And so I go back, you're asking about qualifications. So of course, my lifetime. When I was 20, I started traveling the back roads of Colorado and Wyoming, visiting migrant farm workers. And people would say, there they were in the shacks, nothing would ever change. That was 1959. 1962, Cesar Chavez, Dolores Huerta formed the Farm Workers of America, and things began to change. 1989, 1968, Martin Luther King was assassinated in April. Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in June. A week after that, I was back in Washington, D.C., walking with hundreds of thousands of people from Washington Monument to Lincoln Memorial. And again, one might say, what difference did one person make in that? Well, what if I hadn't gone? What if another person hadn't gone? What if another person hadn't gone? What if nobody had gone? But they were saying, nothing could change. And within a week or two, the whole place was torn down, all the tents and so on. But yet you come to 2009, and an Afro-American is elected president of the United States, and things can change. 1985, I went to South America. I lived in a cardboard shack for 8 years, a government housing project without water, without sewers. People had already been living there for 10 years, and people said nothing could change. Well, go back and see today where those people are living and how the education they're getting and so on, and things did change. And finally, you come up to our time. Okay, when I said to someone, like 5 years ago, I was thinking running for office, his first question was, do you have $1 million? And I said, I don't want to start a business, I want to run for office. And you come to our time, and here's this guy, Bernie Sanders, asking people for $27. I'm just saying things have changed. And so I still feel there's a tiger chasing me and probably chasing all of you too, and lots of other people. And that tiger says one person can't make any difference. Well, I believe one person can make a difference. So sorry for the long answer, but you ask, why am I running? Those are some of the reasons I'm running.
Charlie, what do you believe is the biggest challenge facing the nation? And once you identify the biggest challenge, name 1 or 2 others.
The biggest challenge, I think, at this moment is to bring us all together. I'm running as a Democrat. When I first tried to run, I tried to run as an independent 4 years ago. Over 100 volunteers went out in the streets. We gathered up signatures. We almost got enough. But it was because I'm running as a Democrat, and the Democratic platform is a fantastic platform. And I have no problem with it. And I think if people would read it, most people in Wyoming would identify very much with it. But at the same time, I mean, we are all part of the United States. We're all part of the world. And the biggest challenge is to bring us all together. Okay. Now that's not high on my list of, if you look at the little cards, but you asked, what is the biggest challenge today? And that's so that we can all talk to each other. We can have different ideas, but we don't have to knock other people's personalities or little things this way or that way. I learned in high school that the lowest type of argument was ad hominem, attacking a person, not attacking their ideas. And so, I don't know, that just came off the top of my head, but that's what I feel more than anything else. We've got to talk to each other. Okay, you want some other things that are concerning. It's a matter, my father, maybe it's related things. My father was an immigrant from Austria. My family came here almost 100 years ago. Parents didn't speak any English at all at the time. He had a 40-hour-a-week job, and with that was able to support 6 kids with clothing, with food, buy a house, and that's not possible today. again, being a traveler, I was studying Spanish in Cochabamba, Bolivia. That was about 1985 or so. And I had a room in some people's house, but I would eat my meals with them. And one day a kid came home from school and said, "Hey, no school next week, thanks to Chicago." And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, no, it's May 1st. And I said, "Well, what does that have to do with Chicago?" He said, "It's Workers' Day. It's Labor Day." And I said, "Okay, so what?" Well, what I didn't realize was in 1886, the Haymarket strike and Haymarket massacre in Chicago took place. May 1st, people went on strike, and a few days later, people died. And so throughout the whole world, May 1st is celebrated as Workers' Day, except in the United States. I won't ask all of you if you knew that because hardly anyone realizes that. I've seen second grade textbooks in South America that will have 2 pages on what happened in the United States and Chicago at the beginning of May 1886, and we're not aware of that. Those people were fighting for a 40-hour work week, 8-hour day. And here we are, 130 years, I think, later. And that's not true. I substitute teach in junior high and high school level. And teachers often lament that parents aren't involved in the life of their kids. Well, I come out of a supermarket and I've talked to a man. He's working 75 hours a week. How much time does he have to spend with his family? That's one of the biggest challenges I see today is the injustice in the salaries that people are making. And I get upset when someone says to me, okay, on my little card, I talk about raising the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And people say that, that's impossible, can't do it. Again, you look back in history, 1914, Henry Ford was having trouble with his workers. There was a huge turnover. Go around Cheyenne and look at all the places. Help wanted, help wanted, help wanted, help wanted. Talk to people who are there. There's been a constant overturn of their employees. Henry Ford had that problem in 1914. So how did he resolve it? It was in January, I think it was January 5th, 1914. He doubled the salaries of his workers. He cut back on their hours. And suddenly everyone wanted to work for Henry Ford. And they had money to buy things. And they had money to buy his cars too. And in Cheyenne, Wyoming, if your big corporations, if Walmart, Kmart, and so on, would pay their workers $15 an hour, then those workers would be able to come downtown and buy things from the small businesses downtown. And McDonald's, their employees would be able to come and eat at the restaurants downtown. I'm not saying that the $15 minimum wage should be for everyone, but your large corporations could go to that very quickly and the whole world would be different because of that. So one of my concerns is people not making a living wage after working 40 hours. Someone said to me the last time, look, if you want to work at McDonald's for the rest of your life, you're going to be earning the minimum wage. Look, people working at McDonald's 40 hours are doing very hard work. You go to Taco John's, Taco Bell, any of these places, they're running here, there, or whatever, and they are providing a service for people. It's important work, giving food to people. Just the other day, someone said to me, well, if it's an entry-level job and people as greeters, people as cashiers and so on, that's entry level. Hey, as a young man, I worked at Safeways here in Cheyenne, and I was a checker, and I might have stayed in that job for the rest of my life because it was a good job. And the people who were there working in different departments, they were working 40 hours a week and they were making enough to support their family. And they were doing hard work and they were doing good work. It is service, okay? So that's, and that's only a start. It's only a start. If the workers do not get organized, then they're going to be $15 minimum wage, that's great. But there's lots of other things that people have to fight for. And they've got to realize that builds a strong company when workers and management are working together so that everyone is successful. instead of having management trying to keep people. The best thing management can do is make their employees happy. And if you have happy employees, you're going to have happy customers. Okay, so that maybe is the second thing we've got to, and we've got to bring business back to the United States. I grew up in Cheyenne. From the time I was a little kid, I have worn Levi's. Got dressed up nice for all of you today so that you can see, when I go to Washington, I can wear a suit and tie, okay? And a friend was very kind to loan me this tie. His wife picks out nice ties, okay? But I grew up in Levi's. Okay, so I went to buy a pair of Levi's. The most recent pair I bought, $50 a pair. On the back it says San Francisco, but inside, made in Haiti. The previous ones made in Mexico. The ones before that made in Egypt. Those could be made here in Wyoming and sold for $50 a pair. And people could be paid $25 an hour and still pump those out, okay? It's things like that. We've got to bring this kind of industry back to the United States. I called an 800 number to order something. And without making fun of the person's speech or anything, they asked, what's your zip code? I said, 82001. And they said, oh, Shane? I said, yes, Shane, Wyoming. Well, they couldn't pronounce Cheyenne. I can't pronounce lots of things in other countries either. But most people in the United States would be able to say Cheyenne, okay? All right, so being a traveler again, a few months ago I was in the Philippines. This person happened to be in the Philippines and was very nice, but I'm just saying, in the Philippines. Visiting friends, driving down the street, and they said, there's another call center going up. That person wasn't telemarketing. That person was simply taking orders over the telephone. Why? Why can't those orders be taken over the telephone here in Wyoming instead of somewhere else, anywhere else in the world? It's that kind of stuff. And we've got to bring jobs. It's not that I don't like the people in the Philippines, Egypt, Haiti, and Mexico. No, I do. But it's not fair what's going on. Being a traveler along that same way. Mexico. I was down in Arizona for a week, not as a tourist, as a traveler. And so I was on both sides. I was in a garbage dump in Nogales, Mexico, walking with the people through that putrid place. And I asked them, why are you going through the garbage here instead of working at the factory, the US-run factory, not far from here? And the answer was, we can make more money here than we can at that factory. I think we should be ashamed of that. I think we should be ashamed of that. And so that's one of those things of outsourcing that just, I don't know if you can feel it, but my blood is boiling on this whole question. And it's not that I don't love people in other parts of the world, because I do, but we are doing a disservice to them, and we are doing a disservice to our own people by what's going on in that area. Okay, so I'll take a drink of water, and I hope I answered some of the question, why am I running?
That's great, thanks, Charlie. Charlie, you mentioned the importance of working with people and having that dialogue. One of the general public's biggest complaints about Washington is that nothing's getting done. We're not working across the aisle. We're not having those reasonable conversations, as you said. How would you work if you're elected across party lines to actually get something done and get something passed in Washington?
You know, the last time I ran was for the US Senate. It was against Senator Enzi. And I consider Senator Enzi to be a friend. I mean, he and his wife came over to our house for breakfast. We had visited for a couple hours. On issues, we probably see lots of issues differently, but I know I can call him, and he calls me, and maybe that's just an example. And I think it's one of the things here in Wyoming. Usually, if you meet someone from Wyoming, if you haven't met them before, you talk for a few minutes and you know somebody who knows somebody and so on down the line. Liz Cheney, I saw her a week or two ago, seen her a number of times, and I mentioned to her when her dad was U.S. representative. I remember sitting down in the federal building here on a Saturday morning. He had on blue jeans, I had on blue jeans, and we had a conversation together. That's Wyoming, all right? I hope, oh, it will be so much fun arguing about issues, okay? But I hope when we're through arguing about issues, we can sit down and have a cup of coffee together. So how do you do that? I think it just comes from respecting people. I delight. Sometimes I have to admit the Republicans are nicer to me than the Democrats, because sometimes I upset Democrats with my ideas. And I think that would probably be true when I'm in Washington. If at this moment, as we're talking, it looks like it will be Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump, there's things that I would agree with both of them, and there's things that I would disagree with both of them. Okay, but we're talking about issues. We're talking about issues. But whoever is elected, I would hope that someday I would shake the hand of that person.
We'll talk about them in a minute. How important is it, Charlie, for you to maintain your own voice and your own priorities if you're elected, rather than just voting the way party leaders want you to vote? And then how would you buck that system or keep that DC system from infecting you once you get there?
Yeah. Hey, who's going to hold my hand? I mean, who's going to hold my hand down? I cannot see any reason in the world why any party would tell me how to vote. I don't know if that's too short of an answer, but I want to do my best to do what is right. And I'm maybe not a good politician in that regard. Some people have told me I'm not a very good campaigner because I take too long talking to people or listening to people. And I really think that's the most important qualification for a politician, is to listen to people. And excuse me because I'm just taking advantage this time. You're asking questions, but I would love, it would have been nice if I would have had an hour before this to ask you what you were thinking of things, because it would have been maybe of more help to me in many, many ways. But yeah, forget about anyone telling me to vote this way or that way. I will vote for the way that I think is the right way.
Charlie, we want to go through a variety of issues and just have you touch on them. First one is military spending and protecting F.E. Warren Air Force Base. What's your position about the current level of military spending? Is it too high, too low? What would you do as a member of Congress in that regard? And then what do you see as the future of the base here?
My father always said, if the politicians want to go to war, they should be the first ones to go. And that's not the case. My mother, being a woman and wiser, would say, or at least send the old men first. Why send the young men? Okay. I'm very supportive of the military, but at the same time, I think we have a lot of people in Washington who are not as concerned about the lives. Look into the eyes of the young men and young women that we're putting in areas of danger throughout the world. Military spending has got to be looked at. Okay, we have bases in over 150 countries around the world. I don't think that's necessary. And in many ways, the military would like to cut back on that. Military do not want to go into conflict as much as politicians want to go in. So supportive of the military. I'm also supportive of keeping our young men and women safe and not involved in needless conflicts. Warren Air Force Base is a very important part of Wyoming for a number of reasons. And I would hope it would always stay open. At the same time, with regard to the ICBM missile, if the military says we must continue on those, then I would hope our base would be the base that would stay open and would fight for that. But at the same time, for people in Cheyenne to say, we need the ICBMs. I can't say that. I'm not a military expert. If you look at the history of Warren Air Force Base, it was Fort Russell. I mean, there were horses running around, and then horses were gone, and it was Fort Warren. Okay, it was military. Then it became Warren Air Force Base. So you look, and then it became the missile base. Okay, so when you look at the history of Fort Russell, it's changed over the course of time. And for us in Cheyenne to say we need ICBM missiles as such, no, that's not our decision as civilians to say that. But to work everything, fight as much as we can. If the ICBM missiles are to continue to be an important part of our military defense, then I think we should fight the Cheyenne, Francis C. Warren, be the base. But at the same time, to think that that's the only answer. Now, and here's where we're in danger of short-sightedness on this. We have got to have a plan B. What if the military decides to shut down that base? What are we going to do? What use are we going to make of those facilities? A couple years ago, people could laugh when I said, let's make it the headquarters for the Peace Corps in the United States. And as I say that, substitute teaching. Ask a group of high school kids, how many of you know someone who is in the military or who has been in the military? Everyone raised their hand. And then I ask, how many of you know someone who was in the Peace Corps or who is in the Peace Corps? And I remember one class, a girl kind of raised her hand, but generally the question is, what is the Peace Corps? John F. Kennedy would cry if he were in those classes. I do think we have to work, and it even goes down to language. We hear about wounded warriors and so on. I grew up that the people in our military were servicemen and servicewomen. They provide a service to our country. I do not like the term warrior because it includes war. I like the term servicemen and servicewomen. And so some of this is maybe semantic. Some of it comes from maybe studying other languages, but it says a lot about what we're thinking in what words we use. So I want to do everything. It's a scandal too. For example, the Chamber of Commerce asked, are you in favor of building more housing, more apartments on the base? And the reason for that is because our young men and women our young servicemen and women aren't able to pay for the rents in Cheyenne and still serve our country. That's scandalous, okay? When we talk about military expenditures, what about talking about military expenditures for the people who are serving us? There's a book, Skin in the Game, written by a person I know, I think Patty Logue, in which she shares emails that her son shared when he was over in Iraq. One of which he's asking for his folks to send him bed sheets. I mean, there are young men and women outside of our country working to defend us, and they have to ask their parents to send bed sheets? No. So anyway, I want to support our military, our servicemen and women, but at the same time, I want to have as many of them home with their families here in the United States getting decent salaries.
Charlie, if you'll talk to us about climate change and environmental threats, do you think enough's being done? Is there more that needs to be done in the addressing climate change? And have you supported the Obama administration's efforts in that regard?
Hey, with that, I'm with the scientists. We've got to recognize whether it's as severe or not as severe as some people say, we've got to try and do everything we can to leave a good world for our future kids. This whole thing of, here again, we in Wyoming have focused too much on the energy industry instead of diversifying our economy here. And there are things, okay, I grew up in Cheyenne. Climate change. Holly Frontier has a big ad campaign. We're bringing clean air to Cheyenne. That sounds wonderful. Since the time I've been a kid, I've been smelling that smelly air, wondering what kind of damage is it doing to me and the other people around here. I don't know. I can't say all these people walking around with oxygen tanks, that's because of the air they've been breathing. But I'm just saying, clean air, come on. Why didn't you give me clean air when I was a kid, when I was an adult, and all these years? So I want to fight for the workers. I want to fight for the workers. And it upsets me when we are beholden to the energy industry and not to the energy workers. And that some of that has to do with climate change. Let's face it. We've got to do everything we can to make this world as good as we can for the people who are going to follow us. And that means cutting back on anything which is damaging our environment. So I go with the scientists on this. And maybe it's too late, but I don't want to say it's too late, but maybe we should have been concerned about this a long time ago. And remember, it was President Nixon who started the Environmental Protection Agency. It was a Republican, and he should be recognized for that.
Along those lines, Charlie, there have been accusations of EPA overreach. Do you think the EPA has gone beyond what it was originally charged to do, or is it doing what it's supposed to do?
You know, any federal agency from time to time is going to go beyond what they're supposed to do. And when that happens, then they should be called to task for it, okay? However, this past week, a question came up about the EPA and Riverton, Wyoming, and the clean air, saying that Riverton was part of the reservation on that. What upset me was that was the important question. Instead of, why is the life expectancy of the Native Americans on the reservation in the low 50s? And for the rest of Wyoming, it's in the 70s. That's a more important issue for me than whether the EPA overreached itself in talking about clean air in Riverton. What about the Native Americans? Nobody asked in our panel at all about what is happening to those citizens who have been in many ways mistreated for so long. And so maybe forgive me, but I just want to put that EPA question in context. We've got to look into the eyes of people and get away from looking all the time at agencies in Washington and bashing agencies and forget about looking at the people who are involved in these things.
Charlie, talk to us about the Affordable Care Act and healthcare coverage. Do you think the ACA has worked? Do you think it needs changes? And how would you guarantee healthcare coverage for Americans?
The thing that I don't like about the Affordable Care Act, the first thing is its name, Affordable Care Act. It means that healthcare is something you buy. And I believe that people have a right. I said at the beginning, our nation will be stronger if everyone is healthy. And you go throughout the world where healthcare is seen as a right. We talk in the Declaration of Independence, the right to life, okay? Among these rights are the right to life. The right to life means the right to be healthy, and our nation will be better. I will be clear as can be. I'm for universal health care, single payer. The insurance companies in the area of health, as far as I'm concerned, can disappear and their people can go to work. So we have universal health care for everyone in the United States. It's horrible. There are things. I sometimes said, I think one of the first bills I'd introduce in Congress would be to take advertisements on television off the air for prescription medicine. They make you sick. You sit there all day long, people telling you maybe you need this medicine, maybe you have this sickness, maybe the, come on, how much money is being spent in those ads on television? Why do we pay more for medicine than anyone else in the whole world? No. Affordable Care Act, fine, because in the sense that many people, as I travel the state, Lots of people have been able to get insurance that never were able to get insurance before, okay? But it is only a first step. It's not the answer. And there are things that concern me. For example, when the Supreme Court said that it was okay, the next day on the stock market, those in the health industry, their stocks went up. I would have expected to go the other way. But when pharmaceutical companies, healthcare providers, and so on, their stock goes up, then something is wrong, because it was the stock of the citizens that should have gone up that day, not of these multinational companies, some of whom are even moving their headquarters outside the United States, so they won't have to pay the taxes here. So Affordable Care Act, a step, but we've got to go a lot farther.
Charlie, the other issue you talked about was citizens' right to an education, quality education. How do you feel about the education reforms that have happened in the last year or so in Washington, and what more needs to be done to move away from No Child Left Behind and to the ESSA, and what do you feel is the right solution to providing quality education?
My brother went to Georgia Tech, private school. I mean, my parents didn't have money. He went on the GI Bill. One of my sisters was in the nurse cadet program, okay? Same thing. Another one of my sister-in-laws, nurse cadet program. I talked to a nephew recently, and he said, well, people in the military can still get the GI Bill. Yeah, but back in the 40s, everyone was in the military. Everyone. It was basically, education was important for people coming back from the Second World War and so on. Our middle class was built on the fact that people could get a college education. That should be true today. And I got a letter from someone the other day who said, college education is not a right. Look at the Constitution of Wyoming, where it says studying at the University of Wyoming should be as free as possible. That was a dream of people back then. And it was a dream of people at the end of the Second World War. And it could be true today too. We've got to see that as an investment in our country. We are losing lots of good minds because education is only for, it's a luxury. It's only for those who have lots of money. One thought, some people don't like the idea that college education should be free. One thought that has passed through my mind, and some people have mentioned this, that maybe we should get back to the draft, that everyone between the ages of 18 and 25 has to serve at least 1 year. Maybe not in the military. My relatives over in Austria, when they get out of high school, they all have to spend, I think it's half a year, Red Cross or something or other. Well, what about a year of service to your country, and for every year of service, you get a free year of education? You know, $30,000 to spend wherever you want to, go to whatever school you want to, something like that. I'm just talking off the top of my brain, but it upsets me when President Obama says we've got to change our immigration laws so we can bring the finest minds in from around the world. Okay, come on, that's like the Spaniards coming and taking the gold out of here. We're taking great minds out of other parts of the world, and we're not making it possible for great minds right here within our own country to do those things and to become those people. So no, one way or another, I want to see people being able to, whether it's college, whether it's advanced training. My father was a machinist on the railroad, okay? That's, I guess, a laborer that's working with your hands, working with metal and so on. But he came home at night, he knew more about what was going around the whole world than I knew with all my degrees along the way. And to see the work of laborers as any less important than an executive someplace in some building, that's a warped sense of what people are all about, and the great talents that God has left here on this earth. So anyway, I'm for everyone being able to get, one way or another, to get college education or training after high school.
Charlie, the next issue is reducing the federal deficit and the debt. how big of a priority is that, and how do you think we should go about doing it?
The federal deficit, federal debt, those two different things.
Mhm.
Uh, One of the areas I do believe is military expenditures. Uh, I remember when Jane Sanders was here in town, she mentioned that Bernie Sanders and Ron Paul worked together to get an audit of the Defense Department. They weren't able to. I mean, there's lots of money there going out that doesn't need to go out. And that's one of the places. Bernie Sanders would talk about Wall Street and things along that line. But I really think I think there's lots of needless military expenditures around the world that are hurting us. So that'd be one of the places. At the same time, to suddenly say that we've got to stop spending, there are things. Drive from here to Laramie. The road is in terrible shape. It was a few years ago. They fixed some of it, and now there's more to fix, and there's more to fix. Okay, investing, putting more money into our infrastructure, you're also putting more money into people paying taxes back. You're also pumping money into the economy. And so this whole idea of, stop the deficit and so on down the line, it can be a bad decision too. How exactly look at that specifically? Money has never been my priority. People have been my priority. And that would come into play in any decision about the federal budget, the federal deficit, federal debt. People, sometime you go into debt. How many people in the United States have gone into debt so their kids could get an education? Right? They're planning for their kids to have a better life in the future. And so to automatically say, no, don't increase the federal debt or deficit, I don't want to get in that situation of saying, yeah, I will not see that we spend more than what we're making.
The next issue, Charlie, is endangered species. Do you think that the ESA is working well, or we've got delisting issues or concerns with the wolves and the grizzlies? What are your thoughts about that and how it's affected Wyoming?
I was thinking about the wolves, and I'm thinking about the rancher who, one study I saw, it wasn't a question about the wolves, but the recompense that people get when wolves kill their animals, that it's not fair. Again, with all these things, people can go overboard. And if agencies go overboard, then they've got to be called back into line on it. And so endangered species, I think we do have to protect. It's part of our ecology. Again, being a traveler, here I am in Venezuela on a plantation, the cocoa, okay? And they produce some of the finest cocoa in the world. And there's mosquitoes, but they don't kill the mosquitoes because they're afraid if they kill them, they will upset the whole thing of nature there that has produced this fine product all this time. So now someone from outside can go in and with insecticide and kill all these, but what change will take place there? We've got to be concerned about creation and all of the plants and animals around us. Now, can one go overboard on things? Yeah. But I guess on that whole thing, I'd say, let's have common sense rule. And if a federal agency has overstepped its bounds, and call it back into question. But to ask me, are there too many wolves? or not enough wolves, too many wild horses. I remember last time I ran, got letters from all over the country, save the wild horses, save the wild horses. Well, these are people who don't live in Wyoming and don't know what the situation and don't realize how cruel it is too to let the wild horses being overpopulated. So anyway, basic thing is in this area, I would have to listen to the people, the farmers, the ranchers, and others, and the ecologists too.
Charlie, you're from Cheyenne, so you know the issues with the Cheyenne Regional Airport and enplanements going down. How important is it to guarantee funding or provide funding for airports and air service in Wyoming? And what's the federal government's role in that?
Wow. You know, I've traveled a lot. I always used to fly out of Cheyenne. And I don't anymore. And that's not good. That's not good. So there's a place where federal money could help transportation in Wyoming. And we're talking about mass transportation. It's one of those areas that's really been neglected. Again, being a traveler. A couple of months ago, I was over in Russia, St. Petersburg, Moscow. Got on a train, 150 miles an hour. 150 miles an hour. We don't have any trains in the United States go that way. The whole thing of transportation has, we've got to look at that. And airports in Wyoming, that's part of mass transportation too. Instead of 20, 40 people driving from one place to another to get to the airport in Denver. So it's not something I've thought about. You just raised the question. But no, our airports are part of mass transportation in the United States. And we should fight for Wyoming so that Charlie Hardy, once again, is hopping on an airplane in Cheyenne instead of going down to Denver to get on an airplane. Isn't that something? I mean, I always flew out of Cheyenne, okay?
Why don't you, Ned?
Well, because it's so expensive. It's so expensive. And that's where the federal government could help these regional airlines.
Charlie mentioned earlier, we're going to come back and talk about the presidential candidates. Can you talk about more about both of them and then about your party's nominee and whether you support her and her candidacy?
Our party's nominee, we don't know yet for sure. I hope you can laugh at that. And I was a supporter of Bernie Sanders. And part of the reason, I suppose, is because Bernie Sanders has been saying the same thing he's been saying for his whole lifetime. And it was funny when I looked at the things I was saying, and they were pretty much the same things. With regard to Donald Trump, I wish he would talk about issues and not talk about people. That's one place where I don't like putting down people, calling people's names, okay? That is definitely a weak point of his, okay? Talking about issues, there's some issues that I would agree with Donald Trump. Someone jokingly, this person wouldn't have as high an opinion of Donald Trump as I have. He said, he's kind of like a clock, a stopped clock. Twice a day, it's the right time. Well, there are things, bringing business back to the United States, I think that's important. I'm not in favor of these trade pacts that have gone on. I respect him very much when he wouldn't take sides with regard to Palestine and Israel. To just come out and say, I'm pro-Israel and so on. Look, if you're going to negotiate, if you're going to try to make peace, you've got to say, I want to listen to both sides on that, okay? So I'm just saying, some things, and if I were to think more, there's probably other things that I would agree with him. And there's many things I would disagree with him. But the main thing I would disagree is the language, okay? I don't like attacking other people, calling them names and so on. With regard to Hillary Clinton, I was very much a supporter of Bernie Sanders. I have not been happy with Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State, but that comes from my living outside of the United States and trying to keep up with foreign policy. And so you would find me in opposition to probably many of her policies with regard to foreign relations. And so what I hope you're hearing is that whoever the candidate, whoever wins, I will agree with them on some things. I will not agree with them on other things. And that's what I think a person in the U.S. House of Representatives should be able to do, is this whole thing of voting party line. No, I'm sorry, I cannot go along with that. It's what do I see as the right thing? And I know I would disagree with both of them on certain issues. And I know I would agree with both of them on, and whatever the people decide in the United States, I would work with that person. Just as I mentioned, Senator Enzi and I may see things totally different on lots of issues, but I consider him to be a friend. And I think we can talk about things. And he can probably change my mind on some things. And I think I have been able to change his mind on some things too.
Charlie, the last question that I have for you is, what do you believe are the priorities for Wyoming's lone member of the U.S. House, and how would you make your voice heard among 435 voices there?
I think maybe the greatest thing I have going for me is experience. I sometimes say to kids at school, does anyone want to ask how old I am? And someone says, how old are you? And I say, that's a terrible question. I just said, did you want to ask? I didn't say to ask it. But I do have 77 years of accumulated youth. I still ran this morning. I wonder if you asked any other candidate, did you run this morning? And do you still run every day? Okay. I've never been to a hospital a day in my life. Okay. The experience I've had living in other parts of the world, living in Wyoming, meeting with people all over the place, and having good relationship, I think that says a lot. One time, I lived in a cardboard shack for 8 years without running water, without sewers. The police once raided my house, okay? That night, a young man said to me, Charlie, as a Venezuelan, I'm ashamed of what happened today. But on the other hand, I'm glad for 2 reasons. One, now you know how the police treat us all the time. And the other thing is, usually when the police come into the barrio, everyone hides in their houses. They don't want to be seen. But today, nobody could see what was going on inside that shack while they were there. He said, your neighbors were gathering rocks and bottles. And if the police would have come out there with you, they were going to start pelting the police. Okay, here's a foreigner living in another country, and neighbors are ready to come out and start protecting him. That to me is an example of good foreign policy, making friends around the world. And that's also an example of what I think is most important in Congress, is making friends of the people who are there. I go with the attitude that there is no enemy, okay, in that House of Representatives. They are all my friends with differing ideas.
Charlie, is there anything else that we didn't talk about today that you'd like to address with us?
Probably 2 things. One is I don't think women are being treated fairly. And I'm sorry I didn't bring that up sooner. I mean, again, we 67 cents for each dollar, and you can find all kinds of excuses why that's true in Wyoming and so on. It's not fair. Take a look at the candidates who are running for the U.S. House of Representatives. Only Liz Cheney came back and is here, and I respect her for wanting to run for office. And if she had not run, where is any other woman running for office? Okay, I hope we will, and we will over the course of time. We'll debate. I don't see things the way Liz Cheney sees, but I respect her for that. And it's just a shame that of all these men sitting up there on the platform, there are not more women. Okay, and that would come into the area too. No question was asked about reproductive rights. I think it's time for men to start shutting up on the whole question. I was a Catholic priest, okay? if someone came and said anything about abortion, I was not able to give them absolution. I had to go to the bishop and ask for a penance. And I remember Bishop Newell standing in front of the house here in Cheyenne, and he said to me, Father, he said, we men should thank God every day that we do not have to make the decisions that women have to make in their lives. And so this whole thing, I mean, a woman came up to me one day. She said she had a child. The doctor said that she was expecting another one, that she probably would not live. And she said, I had to make a decision. She said, we prayed, we thought, we decided to go ahead with the pregnancy. The child was born, everything came out all right. But she said, I can understand a woman who would say, who's going to take care of this 2-year-old that I already have? What if, and come to a totally different decision. So that's where I am. I think men should shut up. I get so upset about men at the head of Right to Life groups and should listen to the women. Men should start talking about male responsibility and get off talking to women what they should be doing. That's where I am. I am not in favor of abortion. I don't think anyone is in favor of abortion, but I'm not going to stand in judgment of any woman, any person who's been involved. So that's one thing. Women. I think women have, one of my sisters was a city commissioner in Atlanta, Georgia, in charge of the water system for the whole city under Andrew Young, Maynard Jackson, okay? But she said, I've been passed up for so many jobs by men who are less competent than me, okay? That's got to stop. So that's one question, the area you didn't bring up. The other thing is felons. God, as I walk down the street, say hello to people, so many people say, I can't vote. You can't, yes, because 30 years ago, something happened. Standing in front of the post office one day, talking to a friend, federal judge, I said, Ellen Johnson, I said, Ellen, I need a course on Felon 101. How does a person become a felon? And then I said, I want a course, Felon 102. How does one get out of being? And Jack Spade, a lawyer, said, it's impossible. Okay, that's not fair. People have, this whole thing of incarceration in the United States, it's a big business. It's a big business, and it's hurting people, and it's keeping them from exercising their right to vote. So that's another area where we've not touched on it, but our prison system, I was talking to someone with the prison system here in Wyoming who was very complimentary of the efforts that are being made. But then you look in the newspaper and they're cutting back on the budget for, to help people come out of the prison and be productive citizens, we're cutting back on the budget. Okay, so those are two items that I'd like to bring up. The unfairness to women, and secondly, the unfairness to people who somewhere along the way did something in the way of violating the law. And today, because of that, cannot vote. It's not fair.
Anything else, Charlie?
No, other than to say thank you. Forgive me for talking so much, but I guess that's what you wanted me to do. And it is a privilege. It really is a privilege. And I want to thank you for this because it is so important. And I don't envy you deciding who you're going to endorse and things along that line, because whoever you decide, some people are going to be unhappy. And some people aren't going to care one way or another. It doesn't matter too. But the fact that you've taken time, an important time, to spend an hour listening to me is something that I'm really grateful for. I want to thank you.
Thanks for being here.
Well, thank you.